These are the very people the liberation struggle was meant to help.
Government simthande okonje waphatha South Africa. ANC sithanda kakhulu mari ngoku. Ngohlobo esibona ngalo, ANC akuna ayinasizo ukuthi kozibulala abantu bayo ebebeyisupport ukuthi mayibe yiyo eyohlala eParliament iphathi ilizwe. Ngabantu ababulele nathi ufana ukuthi usibulele asena ndaba nayo. Kuba akho nto isenzele yona sibulalele kuphela. Noma sihlupheka noma sibulawa ezweni lakho sekulungile masithandaze noma sihlupheka noma sibulawa ezweni lakho sekulungile masithandaze ke baba kulungile sekulungile.
Now they just have each other and broken dreams. They don't know how they will survive. Soon they'll return to their homeland in the Eastern Cape, 1,000 kilometres to the south. Not much has changed here since apartheid. Underpaid black labour still powers the mines, and it's mainly the whites who own the industry and take the profits. The only difference is that a tiny black elite have joined the white elite on boards of companies. In the late 1990s, the ANC government struck a deal with business. They would keep labour cheap and stable in return for some black ownership. Many see this arrangement has been at the expense of poor black South Africans, while a few, like Kra'teaque, have benefited.
The approach there was black economic empowerment, to let black people advance. I'm one of them, by the way. I went into business for quite some time in mining, in the financial services and so on. Is it the only solution? Certainly not. It is just one way. It is just a way of getting people into the ownership of companies. But that's not what we're trying to do, to get everybody to become a businessman.
But it seems to have only benefited for a few at this stage.
Naturally, I'll accept that. I'll accept that because the approach is you can't turn everybody into a shareholder in the country. A government which is confronted with a lot of difficulties and challenges around education, health, poverty, and so on. These issues have got to be addressed. And I think we're getting there, but there are problems, and we must admit where there are not policy problems, because the policies are in place, but implementation and making sure that people are held accountable to what they're supposed to be doing.
In the absence of interim funding, the application for a postponement will be decided on Monday.
And the biggest accountability test for the ANC government is the Commission of Inquiry into the Marikana mine massacre.
The order we make is that the sitting of the Commission will be adjourned.
So far, the Commission, which has been sitting for 10 months, has been dogged by delays and false starts.
It would be a huge disgrace, it would be a huge loss. If the Commission, for example, was to stop its work, I don't know what will happen.
The Commission has heard compelling evidence against the police actions. These pictures show how the police planted false evidence to try and justify the killings by placing weapons beside the dead for the official police photos. Photos taken earlier by the media show no weapons present. The widows and their lawyers are seriously concerned that the miners are going to have their legal funding cut by the government. And if that happens, they'll boycott the Commission.
Into ebesizele ukuthi inyane sise commission ukuthi sizovutha abayeni bethu basole kanjani. So ngoku asibona kunje abasebenzi bengafuneka ukuthi bangene ngaphakathi bengenagqwetha benaloya yabo. Kuyasikhathaza ngoba ngabona babekhona ngela xesha kwakubulawa abayeni bethu. So xa bengakwazi ukuthi bangakhona igqwetha labo siziva kabuhlungu usho ukuthi okunyani bale commission abusekho.
It's also proving to be dangerous to be a witness at the Marikana Commission. 6 miners have been murdered just before they were to take the stand.
Crucial potential witnesses kept on dying. Unfortunately, we cannot, as legal people, pin it on any of the parties. But it is disturbing. It is disturbing to an extent that one of our advocates was also stabbed, and it was somehow suspected that it was linked to the commission itself.
There's little faith in the commission. Currently in South Africa, about 9,000 police officers face criminal charges such as rape, corruption and assault. But less than 100 have ever been convicted.
This 24-acre pond is in fact a giant sinkhole, the remains of a collapsed cavern in Assumption Parish, Louisiana. And although it looks placid, it's still hungry. The sinkhole near the village of Bayou Corn and Grand Bayou formed almost overnight in August 2012 after a so-called salt dome cavern, a giant underground mine, collapsed. The structure, owned by a company called Texas Brine, was closed in 2011 after years of being mined and expanded. Workers have since been trying to stabilise the cave-in, which has ruptured underground gas and oil supplies and sent roiling, bubbling burps of it up to the surface, causing the 2 nearby communities to be largely evacuated due to fears the toxic mix could explode. Around 350 people have been ordered to leave their homes. Not only that, but there's now reportedly a risk of highly salted water from the cavern infecting the freshwater swamps nearby, which would likely be a catastrophe for local wildlife. Louisiana State is suing Texas Brine over the sinkhole, whilst they in turn are suing the landowners, a company called Occidental, and 3 other companies who were involved in the operation. In the meantime, the sinkhole continues to grow. It's thought it could be years before the ground settles.
You're a champion.
That's flipping. Monty don't care.
Daddy. Hey, Daddy, do you want me to call you?
No, don't say it. No. Oh, gosh. So when we post this video, we're going to be like, beep. Nova. What you back here?
I come from the water. I crawl up on the shore. I left my brother's name. I got what I came for. I struck the water in. It rolled up on the sand. It burned beneath the sun to be a man.
about that? Hey! Hang on.
Life in the desert, just to be together. The sand forever, the same forever. It moves beneath me, it pulls my body. My pulse beats harder, so far from the water. I love to see the sun get fire. It's done. I pray for shade and rain. I pray to live again. I come from the water. 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 Yeah, 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 yeah. I come from the water. I come from the water. I come from the water.
Anyway.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
He still got his toes.
I love you.
Love you, Mom. Flower. And sun.
Love you.
Sun
Not
shirt.
really.
Sun shirt. Sun shirt. La, la, la.
I'm playing in the room, watch a movie.
Bye.
Bye.
My name is Carrie Withers. I'm here to let y'all know of the problems and the situation that we've been going through with this company by the name of Industrial Carbon Service. They've been back there for about maybe 2 years, and what they are doing, they are bagging and reprocessing petroleum coke that is being brought in big jig bags, and also they are coming in dump trucks. They are illegally operating right now. They don't have a permit. Right now we're just looking for help because this community really needs help. We feel like we're getting dumped on, and we don't think it's right. Our way of living has been taken away from us. We're, like I said, we are on the TV interview that I did, we're like prisoners in our homes. People have been sick. This stuff is in our homes, our cars, our rooftop. I mean, it's just everywhere. People have suffered with sinus, pneumonia, eyes be burning. My husband and I got real sick, and I thought I was dying. I'm not gonna lie to anybody. I had never had an infection like this, and I didn't go to the doctor. But in the end, when I got through tired of fighting the over-the-counter stuff, I called the doctor, and he wrote me out a prescription for some antibiotics. Even with that, it took me 3 weeks to get over what I had. My husband went to urgent care the first part of January with the same thing, and he had it bad. It was a bad sinus infection, and everybody in this area is suffering with some kind of illness that they hadn't been suffering with before. So
my name is Lil Anna Brown. This dust has affected myself, my child, and also my spouse. At the present time, my home, I have a roof that's 2 different colors. After the hurricane in 2005, we redid our home roof, and it was brown. Well, now I have one side that's brown and one side that's black. So I know that this dust has been traveling, and it's affecting us here in this community. and we just need something to be done about it.
My name is Faye Anderson. I have been living in this neighborhood for 34 years. I have a lot of concerns because this is a neighborhood. People live here with their children. Our families, our children are important to us. Our children are our future. And not only that, our children need us. They don't need us to be sick. They don't need us to be affected by an airborne product that someone feels that it is okay to put in a neighborhood where people live. And I just don't think it's fair. You know, we're all taxpaying citizens. We all deserve to live in an environment where it is safe and not hazardous. And I just don't think it's fair. And we don't know how it's going to affect us years from now.
Yeah, I'm Paul Washington. Industrial carbon is right down the street from my house. Our city knows about it. Our community is getting to know about it. But it appears that since they have already started, they're claiming that they're going to have a loss when they have started illegally of what they're doing. And I'm sure all our officials, which are smart people, are educated people that we have in office, should have common sense to know that this is wrong. But as for right now, they appear to lean toward the guy that has the money. Even though we've been in this neighborhood longer than they have. They say, well, they've been here so many years, they've been operating, but we've been here forever.
My name is Alfred Caesar. Where this location is at, we have a school, elementary school, which is to the northeast of this processing. And we have a predominantly south wind, so we know that when we're not seeing it in our area, it is going to the north, which is impacting the community to the north, which is called Hillcrest, along with the school. And when the wind is out of the north, then we're getting it. And right now, if you look at all of the homes in the area, especially the ones directly across from this business, then you will find coke fines. You look at their buildings and you'll see traces of the coke fine. So coke fine is something, once you move it, anytime you're going to move it, it's going to get airborne and you can't control it. So yeah, in our community, we've been living here for 40 some odd years, and then this industry comes in and it's kind of forcing us almost to leave because we're kind of prison in our own houses. You can't get out during the week in the evening, you know, in the backyard because of possible coke fine. So we know it's not healthy. It does irritate the your respiratory tracts. So something needs to be done. This is not a place for this type of industry.
My name is Cecilia Hawkins, and this is not healthy for elderly people, young people, anybody, any human being. And it's just, we would just like for this stuff to be stopped, so we could live out in our homes and be comfortable like we was some time ago.
Whenever you have an experience, you devote more of your brain to processing that. And so when you get something, be it academic or sports or music or a thought, it's just that connection is now strong. Now, an important point here is all experiences change the brain. So when you're in a college class and you learn some fact, you've changed the brain. But also the whole college's experience is affecting the brain. Students are often under great pressure. They're often overtired, and this also changes the brain. When you're under high stress and fatigue, what happens is something called downshifting. Downshifting. You shift down to a more primitive style of functioning where the back part of your brain here, which is your concrete sensory area, talks to the motor system, and that's it. You're in a more of a stimulus response mode. Someone comes up and says, your hair doesn't look very good today, and you get really angry at them. You don't have to get angry at them. They may be making a joke. What's happening is under stress and fatigue, or maybe your hair doesn't look good. Some people don't have to worry about it. Under stress, under fatigue, what happens is this front part of the brain here. This is the CEO of the brain. This is where David Lynch is in your brain. This is the director. All other parts of the brain send their information to the front, it gets integrated, it's sent back out. Under high stress, these connections are not used. And when you actually have connections of this part of the brain and someone comes up and makes a comment about your hair, you say, oh, you didn't get a good sleep last night, or it's a joke, or he thinks I'm somebody else. You're not responding to the surface value of that relationship. You can see more fundamental to it. Now, what does happen over time under high stress and fatigue is this area, the CEO of the brain, is just not involved in usual experience. And that's what this picture is of. These are people lying down. This is their spinal cord, so their feet are coming out at you. You're looking up at the top of their brain. This is where the eyes are, and these are both during eyes closed rest. And what we're looking at is brain metabolic rate. Now, this Swiss cheese you see over here, they're not really holes here, but these are areas, these are functional lesions. That is, these parts of the brain are not involved in whatever you're doing. What this means is that you can, and this is, by the way, a very violent individual. It's a criminal. It's not a college student. But high drinking, high stress, mental stress, physical stress results in this. The brain is constantly being rewired. So you may be wondering what can strengthen these frontal connections, and transcending does this. It actually directly exercises the frontal area. It makes it alive. It connects it with the other parts of the brain.
So I've said that in autism, there's often a lot of right hemispheric damage. That helps to explain some of the mentalizing problems. But, you know, in very high trauma, in PTSD, for instance, we now know that the right hemisphere, parts of it actually go offline. They stop processing. And remember, that's the hemisphere that helps you pay attention to novelty. So you're stuck in a trauma, you're reliving it over and over again. You're in a new situation, but you can't even notice the new situation. And a lot of your feelings and your cognition is cut down, and you can't even read emotion properly. We need to be able to read emotion to read minds. When we can't mentalize, our mental reality becomes the outer reality. They're equivalent. They're isomorphic. Our internal world has all the power of the external world, and all our thoughts feel real and as vivid as intense sensory experience. We can be terrified by our own mental experience, therefore. It's so vivid, and we lack the normal ways of reassuring ourselves, such as saying, I'm just imagining this, or it might not happen. That doesn't happen. It's all real. So our negative thoughts about ourselves and others feel totally unalterable. They're set in concrete. And remember, you don't have to be mentally ill to experience this kind of thing. Any of us can slip into non-mentalizing in extreme situations. And we become mind blind. How does that play out, though? We become intolerant of alternative perspectives. We are humorless. We are predisposed to massive generalizations and speak in absolute terms. Men are always, women are always. We understand language literally and often misunderstand nuance. And so we tend to misinterpret others. This is important because we can't read them. We see them as malevolent, and we start blaming and fault-finding, and we get angry. There's rigidity and external focus when you don't have an internal life. We're prone to all-or-nothing thinking. Our thought processes rigidify. We stick to the first explanation that occurs to us. Think about all the arguments you know, where someone makes a silly first explanation, and then they dig into it. So there's a tendency to rigid quasi-infallibility and little awareness of how our behavior is impacting others. We're not mentalizing. This is really important now. Unable to perceive our internal states as internal, we focus on externals, such as school, government, the job, the neighbor, and what others say. And this causes a great problem for us. We become thin-skinned because when we're over-focused on externals and what others say and we're unable to step back and reflect, our self-esteem regulation becomes a prisoner of what others think. When we don't mentalize, we become hyper-responsive to even the most benign criticism. We are trapped in what we perceive as their point of view about us, and critical words or disagreement can feel like violence because we're so sensitive, and that's why people say, you're invalidating my existence. So to summarize this psychological brain material, 4 things contribute to moving towards a state where we don't learn or recognize our other points of view and tend toward the infallible frame of mind. Regression to earlier states of functioning under pressure, a reliance on left brain categorization, generalization, taking things out of context. And I can tell you, I could teach a person to become left-brained. I could take any number of ideologies and train them to become left-brained and turn off their right brain functioning. Then we can have mind blindness for a variety of causes. And as a reminder, George Eliot showed anger makes us feel divine justice is on our side. So all the wisdom of the gods is with us when we are angry.
Tarot card reading brings to mind crystal balls and fortune telling. One UL graduate is combining his card readings with counseling skills to help his clients. Austin Marilos has the details.
Tarot reading is known for being in the occult, where cards are used to read one's fortune or answer questions. But one man is using them in a different way.
A tarot card reading is an experience for you to be entertained, and they want it to be like things that they've seen on TV. It isn't an experience where you come in to be told things that you already know.
But when I've come to a reading with Sam, Sam's readings have always confirmed me and perhaps what I was feeling inside.
You know, I'm paying attention to the way that they react to certain things that I say. I can see what's uncomfortable because people come in when they feel like it's time for that to happen. I like to be with them.
For Louisiana Focus, I'm Austin Marilos.
Football season feels like it's a long way off.
The Cajuns will get to test their newfound strength in the opener versus Grambling, where they will try to win in front of a big crowd at Cajun Field. From Louisiana Focus, I'm Deion Ray.
Hello everyone. Colleges like UL Lafayette enroll all sorts of students, some of whom have secret struggles to share. Asa Grimsley reports on how one struggled just to find a home.
Universities are on the verge of an apocalyptic and terminal collapse. At least that's what you'd have to believe if you went to a bookstore and looked under the education section at the titles. By my count, in the last couple of years, there have been 39 books written on the demise of the North American university. These attacks come from the political left and they come from the political right. They come from inside the academy and outside the academy. I reviewed a couple of these books a few months back for the international science magazine Nature, and I began my review as follows. Universities today are fractious places, populated by customers, formerly known as students, who pay increasingly large amounts of mostly borrowed money in exchange for high grades from researchers with large frequent flyer mile accounts, formerly known as professors, who report to real estate developers, formerly known as university presidents. Now this, of course, is a caricature, but as in most caricatures, it conveys elements of truth. One of the many problems of the modern university is that they have taken on, or perhaps had imposed on them by society, too many goals. Universities are supposed to be triggers of urban renewal and engines of economic growth. They're supposed to cure sick people. They're supposed to generate new knowledge and train the next generation of scholars, and if possible, spin off biotech companies in the process. They're supposed to provide an endless supply of talking heads for the 24/7 news cycle. Now, all of these things, with the possible exception of the talking heads, are social goods. There's nothing wrong with economic development or certainly curing sick people or generating new knowledge, but they have created a culture in which the language tells it all. You talk to any university faculty member and they will tell you about their teaching load and their research opportunities. And being mostly rational people, they attempt to minimize their loads and maximize their opportunities. Thus, we have a reward system with multiple levels of faculty, assistant professors, associate professors, full professors, chaired professors, and then in some institutions, university professors. They are at the top of the pinnacle, 1/10 of 1% of the distinguished faculty. And you know what the distinguishing feature of a university professor is? They never have to teach again. So the problem with these multiple roles and this culture is that they're inimical to the purpose for which universities were founded, and that is to educate young people. And I use educate in the sense of its Latin root, educatus, educare. It does not mean to pour bits of information from my full vessel into your empty vessels. What it means is to open up and lead forth, to open up minds to new perspectives, and then lead them forth to a lifetime of learning.
Meet me at the Circle K and park by the payphone. Meet me at the Circle K and park by the payphone. I got some work, nigga, to help you get your weight on. Meet me at the Circle K and park by the payphone. Meet me at the Circle K and park by the payphone.
Was the idea that humans are irrational in what motivates them, and they're often not even aware of what drives them to act because of their subconscious mind. So then there is this guy, Edward Bernays, and he was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and he used all of Freud's ideas to manipulate the masses into doing things they wouldn't have ordinarily done.
One day, Mr. George Hill, president of the American Tobacco Company, called me in and said we're losing half of our market. And I said, why, Mr. Hill? He said, there's a taboo by men that does not permit women to smoke. So I called up Dr. Brill, who was one of the great disciples of my uncle Sigmund Freud, and asked him what cigarettes meant to women, and he answered very quickly, cigarettes are torches of freedom to women. They want to smoke to dramatize man's taboo against women by not permitting them to smoke, and that's why they want to smoke. So I called up a debutante friend of mine, asked her to get another friend and two young men whom they liked, and to walk from 34th Street to 57th and back and forth, lighting torches of freedom to protest man's inhumanity to women by a taboo against smoking. Next morning, there wasn't a newspaper in the United States, even the New York Times had a front page story, debutantes light torches of freedom to protest man's inhumanity to women by a taboo against smoking.
So how does this work in the mass media? Well, the first time these ideas made their way into the mass media was during World War I in the United States, because everybody at that time was kind of about going to war. So they wanted to whip up some anti-German frenzy. And it was incredibly successful, and an anti-German hysteria was fostered in American intellectuals at that time. Walter Lippmann was a major player in that organization. He was a journalist, and he said this: "We can manufacture consent by means of propaganda." And by that, what he means is we can get the people to do the things that we want through propaganda. Edward I Got Ladies to Smoke Bernays was also heavily involved, and he said the more intelligent members of the community can drive the population into whatever they want by what he called the engineering of consent. It is the essence of democracy, he said. So from the early part of the 20th century, you had some very clever people working in some powerful and effective organizations suggesting that democracy is not about people knowing what is going on in the world and offering their vote upon it. Instead, it was about a small number of people manipulating the will of the voting class to their own ends. Edward Bernays would later, in 1954, turn a total lie into reality for political gain. So in 1954, a company called the United Fruit Company had got a little concerned about the Guatemalan president. They were concerned that this president's policies of giving land to the people was going to make their business practice particularly difficult.
Less than 3% of the landowners held more than 70% of the land. So Arbenz nationalized more than 1.5 million acres, including land owned by his own family, and turned it over to peasants.
So they employed Edward Bernays to smear the reputation of the Guatemalan president. And Bernays played into the huge fear of communism that was so apparent at that time.
The American people recognized that the one real issue, not the phony issue, was the issue of communism, corruption, all tied up with the Korean War. It means that the American people are sick way down deep inside at what's been going on.
He convinced the United Fruit Company to find a top Latin American politician to condemn the actions of Jacob Arbenz. He planted stories in the press about the growing influence of Guatemala's communists. He set up a network of intelligence agents to survey Guatemala, and he then passed these agents off as legitimate sources to journalists. Despite all of this information being false, his campaign worked. It created an atmosphere of fear in the American public's mind. And people feared, for no good reason, the Guatemalan government, which compelled a United States-led intervention. So, the democratically elected president, Arbenz, was overthrown and replaced by a dictator. The United Fruit Company got what they wanted, and it was Bernays' manipulation of people's fears which had helped them to get it. So the tools that Bernays has developed are powerful ones. They demonstrate just how malleable the masses are if carefully designed propaganda is placed in the right place at the right time. He also showed that people could be manipulated politically and not just manipulated into buying things they don't really need. His methods have been proven to be effective. This is called the manufacture of consent, where you absorb carefully designed information, much like the information presented by Edward Bernays, and then you spew out an opinion or a thought or an action which has been very carefully planned for. Bernays believes this to be the essence of democracy. So what do you think? Is this a good way to run a society?
Their wing.
Have we ever tried to meddle in other countries' elections?
Oh, probably, but it was for the good of the system in order to avoid the communists from taking over. For example, in Europe, in 47, 48, 49, the Greeks and the Italians, we
don't do that now, though? We don't mess around other people's elections,
Only for a very good cause.
Can you do that? Do a Vine video on a former CIA director.
Only for a very good cause in the interests of democracy.
All right, thanks for being here. It's always great to see you.
I think that clip should just be played over and over and over on every mainstream television news network for the next, I don't know, several months until people get it into their head that this is the face of the CIA. Yum, 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 yum. Well, we do interfere in other people's elections, but only for a good cause. Can we make a Vine clip of that? Oh, I love you. Let me touch your hand in solidarity. You're so wonderful. It's just everything. That clip is truly everything about the establishment system, the status quo as it exists right now. It's the former director of the CIA laughing with his good friend at Fox News about how, yeah, of course we interfere with other people's elections. Of course. Don't even ask such a stupid question.
We don't do that now, though. We don't mess around with other people's elections.
Only for a very good cause.
Can you do that? Do a Vine video on those former CIA directors?
Only for a very good cause in the interest of mine.
All right, thanks for being here. It's always great to see you.
Only for a very good cause.
Can you do that? Do a Vine video on those former CIA directors?
Thank you very much. Our final witness is also using an assumed name, and again we ask our friends in the media to respect the need for her to protect her family. And we finally call on Naira to testify.
My sister for making fun of President Bush and verbally and physically abusing my family and me on our way out of Kuwait. My mother and I were in Kuwait on August 2nd for a peaceful summer holiday. My sister, our country, and our government, they burned to the ground all the houses in the general vicinity and would not let firefighters come until my older sister had a baby on July 29th. My sister took the incubators and left the children to die on the cold floor. I stayed behind and wanted to do something for my country. And we wanted to spend some time in Kuwait with her. I want to emphasize that Kuwait is our mother. There is no milk available for the baby in Kuwait. Children of Kuwait. I could be an adult. We are children no more. My sister burned to the ground all the houses in the general vicinity and would not let firefighters come until I volunteered at the Al-Adan hospital with 12 other women. My 5-day-old nephew traveled across the desert to safety. I only pray that none of my 10th grade classmates had a summer vacation like I did. My sister dunked his head into a swimming pool until he almost drowned. My sister pulled out his fingernails and applied electric shock to sensitive private parts of his body. He was lucky to survive. My sister had destroyed everything in Kuwait. My sister stripped the supermarkets of food, the pharmacies of medicine, the factories of medical supplies.
From the face of our earth.
Ransacked their houses and tortured neighbors and friends. I'm glad I'm 15. We repeated this on the roofs of our houses in Kuwait. I'm glad I'm 15. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank all the witnesses who've past 8 years in the existence of the Congressional Human Rights Caucus, we've had scores of hearings about human rights abuses throughout the world. And I know my co-chairman, Tom Lantos, will join me in telling you that we have never heard, in all this time, in all circumstances, a record of inhumanity and brutality and sadism as the ones that the witnesses have given us today. I don't know how people of the civilized countries of this world can fail to do everything within their power to remove this scourge from the face of our earth, and the witnesses, by providing to us eyewitness accounts and reports detailing the conduct of the Iraqi soldiers under the command of Saddam Hussein have done great service to their country and to ours and to all countries in the world. We must join together and take whatever action may be necessary to free the people of Kuwait from this aggression and brutality. Tom Lantos. From the face of our earth.
Make a political point, what's the point?
Well, the documents are less clear about this. But what looks to be, there are many, many documents that say, look, this is going to give me a hammer on those boys, meaning the Russians. That's the president talking. Another one says, this is the master.
This is Truman.
Truman. His Secretary of War says, this is the MasterCard of diplomacy against the Russians, the atomic bomb. There are many, many documents that strongly suggest, particularly the Secretary of State, James Burns, understood that the bomb was more a diplomatic tool than a military tool. The chief of staff of the U.S. Army and the combined chiefs, General Marshall, said this is not a military decision. It has nothing to do with the military. It's maybe a diplomatic, political, other kind of decision, but it's not a military decision. So, interestingly, the military, I mentioned this, I think, in our last discussion, virtually all the major American military leaders went public after the war, saying the atomic bomb was totally unnecessary. Some called it barbaric. The president's chief of staff went public. Can you imagine the chief of staff saying, and he was a good friend of the president, said, this is barbarism. I wasn't taught to kill children and women. So that's very clear. The strongest evidence is, and you can't prove this with the available documents, that is mainly aimed at the Russians because they want to use it as political pressure and political weapon, both in Eastern Europe and in Asia, where the Cold War really was starting.
And even though
And we are living in the 21st century. We are the first black people who liberate ourselves from the French rule. We fought 3 empires, the British, the Spanish, the French. So it's unacceptable for us to be occupied right now.
I believe in spirits. Next to Santa Claus. I'm just wondering because don't rule them. You don't?
All right.
I believe in spirits.
Next to Santa
I'm
Claus.
just wondering because
Don't
rule them. You don't?
I do. I absolutely do.
Well, I hope so.
Santa
I'm
Claus,
just
you believe in
wondering because
You see, after the earthquake, countries around the world donate billions of dollars. The amount was much larger than $6 billion. And Bill Clinton was in charge of the money. And not only people around the world, but also American celebrities donate a lot of larger money to rebuild Haiti. And hundreds of homes were destroyed after the earthquake. And if you can believe, the people are still living under tents. That's unacceptable. And not only they held the money, they kept the money, but Haiti had enough resources for them to be very comfortable. Haiti have oil, more oil than Venezuela. Nobody's talking about. Haiti have gold. We have one of the largest gold mines in the Caribbean. So, and they let the world, nobody's saying anything about our goals. Yeah. And who do you think is in charge of our goal right now? The contract. Yeah. Tony Rodham, Hillary Clinton's brother. Wow. He's got a 26 years contract. And then also Haiti used to produce, we used to produce our own rice. We didn't have to buy rice overseas. Bill Clinton destroyed our rice so his brother can sell the rice from Arkansas. Yeah, wow. So they're doing a lot of things. Right now, if there's a millionaire or a billionaire who wants to do business in Haiti, they cannot do anything unless they check with the Clintons. The Clintons are the one who's running Haiti.
And I was very proud to have
Did you talk about vice presidential possibilities with Senator Warren?
I believe in spirit. I believe in spirit. I believe in spirit.
I believe in spirit. I'm just wondering because
I believe in spirit. I believe in spirit. Spirit. I believe in spirit.
I'm just wondering because
They dropping disease in Haiti. They stealing our money. They stealing our resources. So we are out here. We are outraged for the crimes of the Clintons. Hillary Clinton have too much criminal records. She have no business running for president.
The nuclear option should not at all be taken off the table. That has been my position consistently.
the nuclear option should not at all be taken off the table. That has been my position consistently.
When it comes to Hillary Clinton's brother, how was he able to get that contract? How were the Clintons allowed to have such control of Haiti?
It's a family affair. Bill Clinton, the United Nations named him the chief guy who was in charge of rebuilding Haiti, and then while Hillary Clinton was the Secretary of State. So it's a family thing. Chelsea Clinton, all the Clinton Foundation, they're just stealing money.
I got hot sauce in my bag, swag.
So what's something that you always carry with you?
Hot sauce.
Hot sauce. Hot
Right now, hot sauce. Hot sauce in my bag, swag?
Hot sauce.
Really?
Yeah.
I just want you to know, people are going to see this and say, okay, she's pandering to black people.
Okay. Is it working?
Oh yeah, baby. Oh yeah. Oh yes, I like that.
The Clintons want to be the one who choose a president for us. That's unacceptable. We don't even have a president. We cannot have we don't have an election right now because of the Clintons. This needs to be stopped because they chose the one we had before was Michel Matteli. He was a crackhead, a guy who's putting down his pen, doing all corruption. He's the one that the Clintons support. And then on his administration, the Clinton was allowed to steal billions of dollars in Haiti.
In 1890, William James of Harvard, creator of American academic psychology as a science, wrote, I'm quoting from Psychology, "Habit alone is what saves the children of fortune from the envious uprisings of the poor. Habits of deference, habits of suggestibility, habits of regarding people in the same boat as yourself as competitors." Shortly after James wrote that, our institutional schooling was set into motion for the very first time, fashioned by the children of fortune to teach habits to the envious poor. Track the leadership mind through recent history, and you will see that William James was only echoing the attitudes of his class. Winston Churchill, for instance, not Saddam Hussein, was the first person ever to order poison gas use from the air against the civilian population. He did that to the Kurds in what eventually became Iraq. And stung by criticism of this murderous decision, Churchill defended himself with these words in 1918, I'm quoting, I don't understand squeamishness about the use of gas. I am strongly in favor of using poison gas against uncivilized tribes. It's a shame he didn't mean the English. Female leaders, given a chance, have shown a similar disdain for the unfortunate. Victoria Woodhull, not Hillary Clinton, was the first American woman to testify in front of Congress, the first female stockbroker, and the first lady to publish a newspaper. In 1872, she officially ran for the American presidency. And in her book, The Rapid Multiplication of the Unfit, which is still in print, by the way, she warned against the incurable biological depravity of the poor. What kind of schools that Mrs. Woodhull or William James or Winston Churchill would have signed off on, I don't need to leave to your imagination, since they are all around you.
Roald Dahl, James Bond creator Ian Fleming, Noel Coward and Leslie Howard were part of a group called the Baker Street Irregulars. Their mission was to spy on the US and convince them to join the war, and they were selected because of their ability to charm and schmooze. Dahl himself had to seduce the wife of the anti-British isolationist owner of Time magazine, which he did a little too successfully. He was quoted as saying to his commanders, "I'm all effed out. That goddamn woman has screwed me from one end of the room to the other." One of their achievements was to convince FDR that the Germans planned on world domination by slipping him a faked map of South America.
Minor differences. So can you talk about that and how, and I think that the ruling elite are afraid of the left and the right realizing that they have common interests.
Well, that's why they assassinated Fred Hampton. Because Fred was the great Black Panther leader
right
out of
in
Chicago,
the 60s.
Was uniting. I mean, he was addressing white Aryans in Chicago who were applauding him. And,
no kidding, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I never
Fred
heard that.
Fred was building a Poor People's Coalition.
Oh.
And as long as he remained a Black Panther, they could deal with him. That's why the FBI drugged him, burst in there, and assassinated him.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's 24 years old.
The extent to which George Tenet, former head of the CIA, Donald Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, and George Bush are responsible for command complicity in the abuses we are talking about. Again, what are the real-world parallels? Compare this with this. Only paper bags are, we're ecologically minded in America, so we substitute those with sandbags. So now we don't use paper anymore. We have prisons in black sandbags chain. This is Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. So of course, I'm going to see parallels. But James Schlesinger, who was a former Secretary of Defense, he headed one of these investigative reports. And let me just take a minute to say the parallels that he sees. The potential for abusive treatment of detainees during the global war on terrorism was entirely predictable based on a fundamental understanding of the principles of social psychology, coupled with an awareness of numerous known environmental risk factors. Findings from the field of social psychology suggest that the conditions of war, the dynamics of detainee operations carry inherent risk for human mistreatment, and therefore must be approached with great caution and careful planning and training. No training, no caution, no careful planning. Psychologists have attempted to understand how and why individuals and groups who usually act humanely can sometimes act otherwise in certain circumstances. That's my Lucifer effect. He hadn't read it because I hadn't written it yet. But he did read the landmark Stanford study provides a cautionary tale for all military detention operations. This is 35 years old. I mean, who doesn't know the basics of that study? In contrasting the relatively benign environment of the Stanford prison experiment, the report makes evident, quote, that in military detention operations, soldiers work under stressful combat conditions that are far from benign. So here's this guy I defended, Chip Frederick. It was his idea to put this guy, putting him on the stress position was a Donald Rumsfeld idea, but to put electrodes on his hand and make him think that when his legs gave way, he'd fall off and he'd be electrocuted. So he did some bad things. He admitted to them. There's no question about it. You're in the pictures. What was he like before going down to that dungeon? The most all-American patriotic soldier imaginable. He's a poster boy for the military. He loves the American flag. He loves the Star-Spangled Banner. He won 9 medals and awards before going down to that dungeon. When he was in Kuwait, the kids loved him. There are pictures of him playing with the kids. He's trying to learn Arabic, even though he has, very limited educational level. A model soldier in every way. So dispositional, very quickly. I have him tested by the Army psychiatrist. Normal on every dimension, no sadistic tendencies. He comes from a small town in Pennsylvania. I said won 9 medals and awards. He had been a good guard in a low security prison. He was a super patriot. What's the situational? Everything we saw in the Stanford Prison Study is there. The dehumanization, de-individuation, moral disengagement. Worst abuses happen in both places on the night shift. He worked 12-hour shifts, 4 p.m. to 4 a.m., 7 days a week, with not a day off for 40 days. He gets 1 day off and works 2 more weeks. In the most chaotic conditions, the places under bombardment, prisoners and guards are being killed all the time. Prisoners are trying to escape. Electricity goes out. Prisons are wandering around naked. It's filthy. There's no toilets. There's porta potties that overflow, so there's shit everywhere. There's rats all over. And he's in charge now of 1,000 prisoners, 12 Army reservists, 60 Iraqi police who are smuggling weapons in. And he has no training and no supervision. Not once in 3 months did any senior officer come down to that dungeon. And as I said, extreme fear. Why did it happen in this one place? This was the place where the CIA and military intelligence did their interrogation of high-value detainees, of people they thought were connected to Al-Qaeda. And then what happened is when the insurgency started, that our military and our military command had not a clue about, they started arresting whole families, men and women. There were children here as well. And they didn't have any information to give. So the CIA and the military intelligence and civilian interrogators put pressure on these military police, Army reservists. They're not real soldiers, they're weekend soldiers. To soften them up, to take the gloves off, to prepare them for interrogation. So they give them the permission to do whatever they wanted to do to soften them up. They just went a little too far, and they took the trophy photos. So who's responsible for creating and maintaining these conditions? Using dogs to induce fear, nakedness of prisoners, extreme stress and fear imposed, sleep, food, sensory deprivation, concealing illegal practice from Red Cross. There were 21 murders in military prisons in Iraq, Cuba, and Afghanistan. Not Chip Frederick or any of those MPs on the night shift. All of these were standard operating procedures that I outlined in my book that came directly from Donald Rumsfeld in a memo of acceptable techniques of interrogation. He brought those to Guantanamo Bay. General Miller put them in practice. General Miller took them to Abu Ghraib and told General Sanchez he had to do it. One of the reports is by a General Fay. He says, the system is guilty. For a period of 7 months, military intelligence personnel allegedly requested, encouraged, condoned, or solicited military police personnel, or they participate in detainee abuse themselves, or they establish procedures. They violate established procedures. The abuses would not have occurred had military doctrine been followed and mission training conducted. It was the environment created Abu Ghraib that contributed to the occurrence of such abuse, and the fact that it remained undiscovered by higher authorities for a long period of time. Who was watching the story? It was not one day. It was months and months that these things went on. General Fay and General Jones get together on their report. They said there are 7 factors leading to this abuse. Only one was dispositional. The character structure of these soldiers. 6 are situational or systemic. They say, looking beyond personal responsibility, leader responsibility, command responsibility, systemic problems and issues also contributed to the volatile environment in which abuse occurred. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who was himself a prisoner in Gulag's, in Stalin's Gulag archipelago, says, the line between good and evil cuts through the center of every human heart.
Our military will take every precaution necessary to ensure the safety and security of civilians.
Easy! You just don't lead them so much! Ain't war hell?
I pulled as much glass from the little girl's eyes as I could so that she can blink. The whole time thinking, fuck, what the fuck, these are babies.
Hey, I need to get the brass to drop ramps. I got a wounded girl. We need to take the rest of mile. Roger, I've got 11 Iraqi KIAs, 1 small child wounded, over.
Oh well. Oh, it's their fault for bringing their kids to a battle. That's right.
I handed the child to the medic, who then ran the girl to a waiting Bradley armored vehicle. I walked back to the van. I don't know why, or what told me to go back to the van. There was just something making me go back to the van. I looked inside the van again. Did the boy just move? Holy shit, the boy just moved. I grabbed the boy from the van and held him against my chest. I was screaming at this point, the boy's alive, the boy's alive. I started running to the Bradley in hopes that it wasn't leaving. At this point, the boy looked up at me. Then his eyes rolled back. My heart sunk. It's okay, I have you. It's going to be okay. Don't die, don't die. I squeezed him a little bit tighter. I put him into the Bradley as gently as I could.
Can you tell Battalion the 2 civilian children casualties are coming back to West Maya and the Bradley, over?
Roger, that's a negative on evac and the 2 civilian kids to Russia. They're going to have the IVs will take them up to a local hospital, over.
What the fuck are you doing, McCord? It was my platoon leader. You need to quit worrying about these fucking kids and pull security. You need to suck that shit up. Quit being a pussy and get the sand out of your vagina. See, my son was born May 31st, 2007. I had yet to see him. And I had a daughter who was barely older than this girl.
You need to suck that shit up. Quit being a pussy and get the sand out of your vagina.
And if you don't know, now you know.
I mean, nowadays with social media, a lot of people are trying to portray that, but on the inside, some may not be happy, some may not be, but they're doing everything they can to spread the positivity to others so that way they can be happy, when really deep inside they're not happy. You know, so the most important part is when I'm shaking, dude. I'm shaking, like it's weird.
He has so much energy in him, baby, that he said this is gonna go viral. That's energy. I met Nate Diaz yesterday. He comes up to me and goes, hey, I met Nate Diaz yesterday. Gonna be my gym trainers. But I'm a man of the people, not above but equal. I don't care where they work. I don't care the color of their skin. I don't care their past history. I don't care their political beliefs. I don't care their religious beliefs. Quite frankly, I've already forgotten both of their names. If I saw them, I would give them the utmost respect, just like I do my mother. You might have a child. Do any of you have a child?
No. Yeah.
Why are we gonna start beefing when we have kids who are gonna grow up and have them start beefing? That's just how God made some of us. Exactly. That I was taught in elementary. Honey, I'm here without shoes. People wonder why you're not wearing shoes, because God created this ground, and when I walk on it without $400 Yeezys, that puts my foot in that was something that was made and constructed, and I don't know if it was evil or good intentions. Why not take my shoes off and walk on God's green earth and get that energy and get on my knees and I say, thank you for another blessing. Yeah, thank you for this. Social media is ruining us, y'all.
It's preventing everybody from being real, and a lot of people are loving people that are fake. You know, they're loving the image of people. You know what I mean? And that's not the thing. Like,
Muffin, come here. Come here. Muffy, keep going.
And that's the thing, man. I mean, you go ahead.
At a different level, they don't want to share. We're gonna keep
damned if I do, damned if I don't. Yeah. Might as well do whatever the fuck I want to do.
Exactly. I think the thing is that when somebody's in this...
Yeah. Homie, that's the 50th girl you smashed this month, and the only reason she smashed you is because you lied to her in the DMs and told her that you're gonna make her your baby mama. What?
And see, that's
what?
That's another thing too. Is it's like it goes hand in hand. It's like when it comes to even cheating for commitment.
He wasn't ready.
He wasn't ready to be mature and be able to stick with one woman who's faithful, loyal. You know, and then the girls cry, and then the
Hey, who the fuck are you texting? Nah, you ain't. Give me your phone right now. And all of the above. Come here, baby. And all of the above.
And the thing is too, when it comes to
every time I've given a speech like this in public, I swear to God, look at any of them, a helicopter has come, because we're radiating energy right now. We're trying to change the world through our words, because there's a kid out there listening right now. A lot of you YouTubers who are leading the kids to hate. Shame on y'all. People cut me off now. I lost over $300,000 on July 15th. I didn't get a single dollar back. I thanked God. I didn't cry.
the money made you crazy.
I said, thank you, God. Look.
Crazy, man. You know what? When you said that last time, I was kind of tripping, right? But now, you're right. I am crazy.
The Carlyle Group is a global alternative asset management group. In a nutshell, they buy and sell companies using private investors' money. The story of the Carlyle Group is the story of a new kind of capitalism emerging in America. We'll start the story with this guy, Frank Carlucci. He had served in a variety of government positions, but from 1987 to 1989, he was serving as the United States Secretary of Defense for Ronald Reagan. He changed the rules on procurement at the Pentagon so that companies would be put on long-term supply contracts. He also had to cooperate with Operation 111 Wind, an investigation looking into corruption at the Pentagon with officials being bribed to secure large defense contracts. 6 days after he finished his term as Defense Secretary, he went straight to the Carlyle Group. And he advised Carlyle to take a look at a company called BDM. They had been hit hard by Operation Wind, and their share price had plummeted. Eventually, Carlyle acquired BDM for $130 million. It was a steal, because it turned out that BDM were on a long-term contract with the Pentagon. Is it possible that a person like Frank Carlucci might have known which companies were on long-term contracts and which were not? Who knows, but the Carlyle Group sold BDM in 1997 for $975 million. After Frank Carlucci came the appointment of James Baker. He had worked in politics for 18 years. He'd led presidential campaigns for President Ford, Reagan, and Bush. He'd served as Chief of Staff, as Secretary of the Treasury, and eventually as Secretary of State under George Herbert Walker Bush. He was and is a big deal.
People know me. I'm kind of a big deal.
But it wasn't going to just be former White House staff joining the ranks at Carlyle. Before long, the former president himself, George Bush Sr., would be giving speeches on Carlyle's behalf. He was senior advisor to Carlyle's Asia Investment Board. Neither the Carlyle Group nor the former president have been forthcoming in the way that he was remunerated for his relationship with the Carlyle Group. The former South Korean president, Park Tae-jun, was also now working for Carlyle, and he'd helped them secure nearly $1 billion in Koram Bank. So when George Bush Jr. gave the United States a pretty radical change in policy towards North Korea,
North Korea is a regime arming with missiles and weapons of mass destruction while starving its citizens. States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world by seeking weapons of mass destruction.
It did not go down well in South Korea. It caused a lot of tensions when the new policy provoked North Korea into doing what it does best, issuing threats. And threats and instability are not good for business. It was widely reported at the time that Daddy Bush, still acting in his role of Carlyle's Asia advisor, sent a strongly worded memo to his son through a former ambassador, and he argued that he should continue negotiations with North Korea, and sure enough, By July, the Secretary of State announced that talks with North Korea would resume. Perhaps it was simple fatherly advice. Nevertheless, it showed just how much influence Daddy Bush had over policy in the United States, whilst he worked for a private company profiting from decisions that government made.
Send every available ambulance, everything you got to the World Trade Center now.
Before long, the Carlyle Group found themselves at the center of a huge controversy. On September the 11th, 2001, Carlyle were holding their annual investors' dinner in Washington, D.C. In attendance was James Baker, Frank Carlucci, and George Bush Sr., who left on the morning of the attacks. Also in attendance was a man by the name of Shafiq bin Laden, the half-brother of Osama bin Laden. And it was just 6 days later that George Bush Jr., the current president, would name Osama bin Laden as the prime suspect.
There's an old poster out west, as I recall, that said, "Wanted, dead or alive."
The bin Laden family maintained they had severed all contact with their estranged brother in 1991 when he lost his Saudi citizenship. But the connections between Bush Sr. and the bin Ladens through the Carlyle Group raised a few eyebrows in the United States at the time. Carlyle said that the bin Laden family had invested just $2 million. But other sources said the actual amount was much higher. The Wall Street Journal ran an article suggesting that Bush, Baker and Carlucci had all met with the bin Laden family at their headquarters in Jeddah on more than one occasion. And that in the ensuing war on terror, the bin Laden family might actually profit from the hunt for their own brother because of their investments in Carlyle. So Carlyle were forced to terminate the relationship between themselves and the bin Laden family, and it was all pretty embarrassing. But they managed their way through the PR catastrophe quite well. Cynthia McKinney, who sat in the House of Representatives at the time, said it is known that President Bush's father, through the Carlyle Group, had at the time of the attacks joint business interests with the bin Laden Construction Company and many defense industry holdings, the stocks of which have soared since September the 11th. It all looked pretty damning on paper. The President of the United States was the son of George Bush Sr., who was involved in the work of the Carlyle Group, which managed investments from the bin Laden family, which looked set to profit from the war which was already being spoken about.
Our war against terror is only beginning.
It wasn't made much better when the president, George Bush Jr., announced a massive increase in defense spending in 2003.
My budget nearly doubles funding for a sustained strategy.
It was made all the more potent by an earmark in the defense budget of $476 million for the development of a mobile howitzer gun called the Crusader, which was manufactured by a company called United Defense, who were owned by, you guessed it, the Carlyle Group. Carlyle's head of communications, Christopher Ullman, would later say it was one of Carlyle's best investments. Defense contractors weren't the only companies increasing their share price in the years following September the 11th. Intelligence agencies were starting to swell too. For more information about that, take a look at our video on the history of NSA wiretapping. It's there. So in 2007, George Bush, as you guys know, would announce Mike McConnell as the Director of National Intelligence from his previous role at Booz Allen Hamilton. 1 year later, right in the middle of his term as Director of National Intelligence, the Carlyle Group made their move to buy Booz Allen Hamilton. In 2008, Mike McConnell headed straight back to his former employer, now a Carlyle Group company. Needless to say, Forbes reported that from their initial $910 million investment, the Carlyle Group made a tidy $2 billion in realized and unrealized profits from the Booz Allen Hamilton deal. It's probably worth noting at this point that Mike McConnell had served as head of the National Security Agency from 1992 to 1996, and he was nominated to that position by George Bush Sr. So when you begin to investigate this kind of access capitalism, as it was called at the time, it does raise quite a few interesting questions and a whole range of paths that you might take to further an investigation. But we'll let you guys decide where we head next with this. Let us know your thoughts about all of this in a comment, and if you liked this video, please do hit the like button and share it on your Facebook page, on your Twitter account, or anywhere else you can think of. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys again next time.
They are not doing what scientists and engineers do when they think they've discovered something. What you do, when you think you've discovered something, what you do is write articles in scientific journals, give talks at the professional societies, go to the civil engineering department at MIT or Florida or wherever you are and present your results, and then proceed to try to convince the national academies, the professional society of physicists and civil engineers, the departments in the major universities, convince them that you've discovered something.
So one of the things we've done very recently is contracted with the University of Alaska to one of the top forensic structural engineers in the country, Professor Leroy Hulsey, Department of Civil Engineering there, to conduct a 3-year, $300,000 study, which is funded by supporters of ours, thousands of them. So here we're going to have this study come out this summer finally. And that's going to be very exciting because we're going to take it to the engineering and architecture schools and universities across the country. So it's very, very exciting to get this out. So we're very excited to get the peer-reviewed papers done and get the feedback from professionals and stir up the academics and the professional associations.
And if you don't know, now you know.
Larry's family opened a window onto something most of us know very little about, the Jewish community of the pre-Civil War South. As it turns out, Mobile was one of its hubs. The city had a small Jewish population, only about 100 people as of 1860. Nevertheless, the community had planted roots and even built their own house of worship, Temple Shari Shomayim.
Wow, there was a temple in Mobile, Alabama.
It was founded in 1844.
Holy mackerel.
Do you recognize any
Yeah,
names?
Sure, Henry Bernstein.
Yeah, they were members of the congregation.
Wow.
That is where your ancestors worshipped.
Holy. All right, this is getting cool.
To this point, the story of the Bernstein family had been totally unexpected. But what we discovered next was a plot twist so absurd, it seemed like something Larry David himself might have dreamed up.
H. Bernstein, private captain, Charles A. Hurt's company, appears on payroll of the organization from March 26, 1862. Are you telling me that my great-grandfather fought for the South in the Civil War? What? Are you kidding? See that? Now that's something. That's something. I can't, that's mind-blowing to me. I can't believe it. That's, wow.
You're looking at a Civil War muster roll.
Wow.
In 1862, your great-great-grandfather signed up to fight for the Confederacy.
All right.
In all, only about 3,000 Jewish men served in the Confederate military, and Henry Bernstein was one of them. Larry seemed to be struggling to wrap his head around the story.
This is just such an odd combination on my father's side of the Germany and the South.
Yeah.
Two places that we have fought against as a country.
Yeah, right.
Oh my goodness. I hope no slaves show up on this.
Please turn the page. Now, Larry, this is another part of the 18th.
Oh, you did it! You did it! I knew it! I knew it! Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Boy.
That's unbelievable.
Oh boy. Name of the slave owner. Henry Bernstein. My great-grandfather was a slave owner. Slaves, one female, age 4, mulatto, one female, age 17, mulatto. Oh, Professor, I'm so sorry. You can see why my father didn't want to tell me anything about his family.
That's called
I
the
don't know where you got this stuff. This is really incredible.
Isn't that amazing?
Holy cow.
I always look for why branches disappear. And you think, embarrassment, something happens, people, we don't talk about it.
Right. That's amazing. Well, Henry Bernstein, I hope you're proud of yourself.
Does it change the way you feel about your ancestors or whether you think about the Civil War?
It's definitely food for thought. I don't know. It hasn't all sunk in yet. I don't know. I tend to just take things in. I'm a bit of a stoic in a way. You know, I don't sit with stuff for too long, and things don't impact me a lot. But this has had just an effect on me. I mean, the whole German thing and the Southern thing, it's pretty wild.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Confederacy?
Yeah. Great-grandfather owned slaves.
Yeah.
What the hell is that?
What part of the Jewish experience is this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The complexity of history comes alive when you do someone's family tree, and you can't make up the peculiarity of these individual examples.
Yeah.
Because when you read a textbook, your family wouldn't be in the textbook because they don't fit.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. It's pretty cool, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, he was.
Have you heard anything?
I haven't heard anything. I've been here since 4 o'clock in the morning. I've been waiting. Waiting by the emergency room, see if anybody gets called in.
What is your son's full name?
My son is Christopher Leinenen.
Christopher Leinenen. And what have the police been able to tell you?
Well, they said there's a lot of dead bodies at the club. That's a crime scene. They can't identify anybody. So it could be hours and hours before we find out. The hospital said that there are some bodies at the hospital that came in and they died. And they're not identifiable yet either. And then there are a few that are in critical condition that aren't identified yet.
Christine, I am so sorry. Were you able to have any kind of communication with your son last night at all? Any text messages, any phone calls?
No, I called him last night at 6 o'clock. He was at SeaWorld. And I was just giving him some information that he was going to need to know for my upcoming surgery. And I left him with, "I love you, Chris." And then I just happened to wake up at 3 o'clock. And I was checking my Facebook. And I saw that one of Christopher's friends, Brandon, had posted on Facebook that there was a shooting at the Pulse. And he doesn't know where his friends were. So I texted him and called him and came right here to the hospital. And we've been waiting since 4 this morning.
Well,
His
Christine,
friend Brandon was in the club at the time of the shooting.
Christine, we are praying
He told
with you.
me that
Go ahead.
He told me that he had just happened to be in the bathroom and he heard multiple gunshots, and he was able to run out the front door. And while he was standing by the club door and the ambulances were coming in, he saw that my son's boyfriend had multiple gunshots and was being taken by the ambulance, but he never saw Christopher come out, and we haven't been able to call him or text him.
Well, we're going to do everything we can to help find him as well, Christine. We're praying with you. We feel so badly, and our hearts are going out to you. Thank you for sharing what you knew with us this morning.
I just wanted to say, though, that this is a club that nobody wants to be in. And please, could we do something with the assault weapons so that we could stop this club from ever getting any new members? I beg all of you, please. I wanted to let you know about my son. When he was in high school, he started the Gay Straight Alliance, and he won the Anna Frank Humanitarian Award to bring gays and straights together. I've been so proud of him for that thing. Please, let's all just get along. We're on this earth for such a short time. Let's try to get rid of the hatred and the violence. Please.
Christine, your words are so powerful this morning.
Yeah.
It's so clear your heart is breaking, and we're thinking of you, we're with you, and know that your words have been heard. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'd like to be on Wheel of Fortune. I think I'd be a great contestant because I'm a lot of fun, and other people would enjoy watching me win or solve or try to solve all the puzzles. I live in Central Florida. I have 2 kittens called Mickey and Minnie, but they're cats. This is the 3rd time I tried to get on Wheel of Fortune. Once I was in Detroit with my son, and he was in a little baby stroller, and I guess I wasn't quick enough at writing all the puzzles down, but I've gotten a lot quicker, and I understand the game more, and it's my favorite game to watch. I DVR it every single night, so I never miss a game. Thank you.
You don't know. I'm going to be on television. I got a call and an application. And...
Come on, Ma. Who's pulling your leg?
No. I'm telling you, I'm going to be a contestant on television. I don't know when yet. They haven't told me when yet. But you'll see how proud you are when you see your mother in a red dress, television, and golden shoes.
What is the big deal about being on television? Those pills you're taking will kill you before you ever get on, for Christ's sake.
Big deal? You drove up in a cab. Did you see who had the best seat? I'm somebody now, Harry. Everybody likes me.
30 hours after the shooting began, a Florida policeman gave her the news she had been dreading.
He said, "Your son is dead."
Just like that?
Just like that.
He never made it to the hospital?
He died on the floor of the club. That's what they said.
Exhausted and emotionally wrought, Leinonen, a former Michigan police officer, says she is more angry than sad.
It's a reason to smile.
That dream was destroyed early Sunday morning, and now their families are planning funerals. Drew's mom, Christine, joins me now. Thank you so much for being here.
Soon, millions of people will see me, and they'll all like me. I'll tell them about you,
What do you want people to know about your son?
I want people to know that he was a genuinely great person. He was fun, he was happy, he was Orlando's child.
Where does your strength come from? I mean, you're smiling, you're able to talk about your son. I think there's a lot of people.
Because I love him. I could be sad, and I have incredibly sad moments, and I could be angry, and I've been given a license to be angry for different types of treatments. But when you want to know about the love, and the love is going to usurp the hate, that's a given.
You feel that love?
Oh, I feel that love with Christopher, with his friends, with you, with the Orlando community. Christopher was Orlando's child. Even though I gave birth to him, Orlando is now the adoptive mother. Because she made Christopher feel the love and acceptance. He went to UCF here in Orlando. That's where he went away to school. I was saying, are you sure you don't want to stay in Pinellas County? No, I want to go away. I want to go to Orlando, to UCF. So he came here to Orlando. He went to undergrad here. He went to UCF grad school. He stayed here after grad school. He loved Orlando. He loved Orlando.
Well, he was incredibly lucky to have you as mom.
My luck started when I gave birth to my son.
Christine, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I'm not sure if you're religious or not, but we're going to say a quick prayer. And,
you prayed with him.
So I said a prayer for him. Yes, ma'am.
I know that you prayed with him,
prayer.
and I mean, you were incredible on every level, Joshua. Just physically actually helping him, emotionally helping him, spiritually helping him. Our thoughts are certainly with Rodney as he goes into surgery, and with you and all the victims there. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Joshua.
Thank you, not a problem.
The millions that are watching this, that want to help, is there anything that you want to tell them? Anything you want to tell the world right now? Anything that you need to get through this?
Just keep praying. I'm not a very religious person or whatever, and whatever religion you are, no matter what you believe, just send it whatever our way. We all need it. We all need something. We all need that hope. Just keep praying for us. We all need it.
And I've been given a license to be angry for different types of treatments. But when you want to know about the love, and the love is going to usurp the hate, that's a given.
You feel that love?
Oh, I feel that love with Christopher, with his friends, with you.
And I've been given a license to be angry for different types of treatments. But when you want to know about the love, and the love is going to usurp the hate, that's a given. You feel that love? Oh, I feel that love with Christopher, with his friends, with you.
You're on the right track.
We have options for the sugar and stuff.
Cinnamon king cake smoothie.
And
what is hemp protein?
Banana, cinnamon, vanilla extract, and hemp protein.
What is hemp protein?
So they say it's the best.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Due to its high fiber and
I've come to talk with you again.
It's got 20 essential fatty
because
acids,
a vision softly.
9 of which the body.
Cool.
Substitution for a cow's milk. It's low in calories, so it's been for all the new vegans coming out in the world.
Cool.
And people lactose intolerant is perfect for that. And
all right. Cool.
And lactose intolerant is perfect for that.
All right.
Stand by it. Unfortunately, it's amazing. So,
Then what's next?
then she's gonna put the hemp in.
So powder that people use, like those huge scoops of protein. You're using just a little one here. You don't need a whole lot.
You can even cut the bananas in half with frozen cauliflower. It's part of our enlightened menu where
cinnamon.
And it's.
And then what is the next one? Vanilla. Okay.
Yep. And cognitive functioning
and then you have frozen bananas here.
Frozen,
freeze the fruit.
Unless you specify if that's what you want.
Okay.
And total would yield around 175.
Okay, so not too bad.
Not too bad.
All right, well, we are actually going to wrap this up. We're going to blend it up, and then coming up after the break, king cake smoothie. Cool. Cinnamon.
And it's.
And then what? Cinnamon.
The Obama administration has granted hundreds of offshore fracking permits in the Gulf of Mexico, allowing dangerous fracking chemicals to pollute the Gulf. The administration approved over 1,200 offshore fracking applications between 2010 and 2014, which took place in hundreds of wells in the Gulf of Mexico. The administration allowed oil companies to dump over 76 billion gallons of wastewater into the Gulf waters in 2014 alone. The Obama administration is essentially letting oil companies frack at will in Gulf ecosystems and dump billions of gallons of oil waste into coastal waters. Every offshore frack increases the risk to wildlife and coastal communities, yet federal officials have been just rubber stamping this toxic practice in the Gulf of Mexico for years.
The Gulf of Mexico has a tragic history of pollution, particularly since the Deepwater Horizon spill in 2010, when at least 5 million barrels of oil are estimated to have leaked into its waters. It now turns out the situation may be even worse after environmental groups revealed the U.S. government has handed out over 1,000 permits for offshore fracking in the very same area since 2010. Now, according to the Center for Biological Diversity, 76 billion gallons of toxic wastewater have been dumped into the ocean as a result of offshore fracking in the area. Kristen Mansell, who is behind the report, says government agencies did not realize the consequences of giving out all those licenses.
We had to submit a FOIA request to even know that they were permitting fracking offshore in the Gulf of Mexico. And one of the most startling things was that the agencies didn't even know it was happening. They didn't even know what they were allowing. And they certainly weren't tracking the practice at all. In fact, it took our FOIA request and the agency going through all of its well records for them to even know how many frack jobs they had permitted. They did so without conducting any real environmental analysis or any analysis on the impacts to threatened and endangered species, and without involving the public, and that's just unacceptable. Offshore fracking is an inherently dangerous practice that has absolutely no place in fragile ocean ecosystems.
The wastewater that leaked into the Gulf as a result of fracking contains chemicals that cause irreversible damage to ecosystems. Many marine species die or suffer genetic mutations in future generations. The pollution also affects coastal communities, increasing the risk of cancer. Kristen Mansell confirms offshore fracking waste contains extremely hazardous materials.
The government hasn't really studied it before. They haven't studied the impacts of the chemicals that these companies are allowed to dump directly into the ocean, including in critical habitat for threatened and endangered species like loggerhead sea turtles. The chemicals used in offshore fracking are listed as among the most toxic in the entire world with respect to aquatic life, and it's just too big of a risk with our fragile ocean ocean ecosystems. I mean, the Gulf of Mexico is one of the most biologically diverse, productive ecosystems in the entire country. And the administration is just allowing these oil companies to frack at will without doing any real analysis whatsoever. And that's just unacceptable.
So then there is this guy, Edward Bernays, and he was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. And he used all of Freud's ideas to manipulate the masses into doing things they wouldn't have ordinarily done.
Doublespeak is language designed to evade responsibility, make the unpleasant appear pleasant, the unattractive appear attractive. Basically, it's language that pretends to communicate, but really doesn't. It is language designed to mislead while pretending not to. Doublespeak is not a slip of the tongue or a mistaken use of language. It's exactly the opposite.
This is called the manufacture of consent, where you absorb carefully designed information, much like the information presented by Edward Bernays, and then you spew out an opinion or a thought or an action which has been very carefully planned for. Bernays believes this to be the essence of democracy.
It is language used by people who are very intelligent and very sophisticated in the use of language and know that you can do an awful lot with language.
I believe in spirits. I believe in spirits. I believe in spirits.
I believe in spirits.
Now with the wolves, you can really see the lives of individuals in the stories of simply the wolves of Yellowstone Park, because in Yellowstone is the only place in the world where wolves have, in fact, been watched through the course of their lives. And there are fantastic stories about individual wolves. There was a wolf, number 21. He was called the super wolf. He distinguished himself from other wolves because his behavior and his personality were extraordinary. He lived at a time of very high density in the population. The wolves had lots of encounters with other packs. There was a lot of fighting that went on. And this one particular wolf, 21, never lost a fight, but never killed a vanquished rival. Both of those things are unique. No other wolf ever did that. He died on his own terms of old age by walking up to a rendezvous site where they used to wait for their pups, and he laid down right there and he died while the rest of the pack walked away across the valley. No other wolf ever did anything like that.
We are trying to chop this poor man. Wait. Let me. Yes, yeah. Yes.
Back up a little bit.
Wait, first I want to show. Yeah, wait. Poor man. Chop the poor man's head off. Yeah, we can see the deed now. Yeah, I'm zooming in. See him. Oh. Oh, just.
Yeah, he dodged it well, didn't he? See if he dodged it.
Yeah. He's so good at dodging, bruh. Chop his head off.
Oh, did I did chop him right in the head? Look at that.
Oh my goodness.
I didn't think I got him. See if I can get him again.
Chop his head off. Yeah, I'm still recording.
Oh my.
Right in the middle there. Let's see the damage. Look. Wait, first of all, let me get let's sit down. I'm not ready yet. Still not ready yet. Okay, I'm ready. Oh, he dodged it real good. No damage. 0 damage. But let's see what damage it got. Yep, you chopped his hand. Almost. Ready. Wait. Need focus. Got it.
Got it.
Ready. Wait, let's see the damage.
Got a hit there a little bit.
Yep. Yes. Wait, no. Okay, now. Wait, what happened? What got chopped off?
Is that perfect? Can you see it?
Yeah.
We don't call that a kill shot, huh?
No, you
Want
have
me hit him
to.
some more?
You have to chop off his head.
Parishioners at St. Bernard Parish in Breaux Bridge were stunned to hear their pastor was charged with child pornography. Father F. David Broussard faces 500 counts of child pornography. He's been the pastor of St. Bernard Parish for 2 years. State police say the Special Victims Unit received a complaint that the computer Father Broussard had primary access to contained child pornography.
My only understanding from the police that I visited with was that the computer was brought into the repair shop. And the technician there, as I think it's state law, they have a duty to report anything that is illegal.
Bishop Douglas Desatel says the Diocese of Lafayette has never received a complaint against Father Broussard until now.
Only good letters, you know, it's the people who loved him in the parish. But, you know, this kind of illness hides itself, you know, in a person. We don't know.
Bishop J. Douglas Desatel says the child pornography was allegedly found on Father David Broussard's personal computer. He says the computer was allegedly brought in for repair, and he believes it was the technician who was the one that alerted the authorities. Broussard has been with the St. Bernard Church for the last 2 years, but has been ordained for 23. Bishop Desatel says the diocese has never received any complaints about Broussard in the past, including complaints from students at the school.
As we know in our society, child pornography is a plague. and it runs the gamut of all strata of society. And it's something that has to be addressed right at the beginning as soon as it's known, which is why I was happy to cooperate with the state officials in doing that, for the protection of young and innocent people.
Diocese has never received any complaints about Broussard in the past, including complaints from students at the school.
Bishop Douglas Desatel says the Diocese of Lafayette has never received a complaint against Father Broussard.
Bishop Desatel says they do not plan to investigate any of the other priests at St. Bernard Catholic Church because they haven't received any complaints.
Bishop Desatel says they do not plan to investigate any of the other priests at St. Bernard Catholic Church because they haven't received any complaints.
For the protection of young and innocent people.
For the protection of young and innocent people.
Those who attend St. Bernard are shocked that something like this happened in their congregation, but say they still have faith in the good work of their church.
I feel bad for the church and the community.
I just don't want this church to be a symbol of the acts of one person, you know. I don't want our beautiful church that we all love to be a representation in any way of one person's horrible and I would call it evil acts.
I feel bad for the church and the community.
I just don't want this church to be a symbol of the acts of one person, you know. I don't want our beautiful church that we all love to be a representation in any way of one person's horrible and I would call it evil acts.
I feel bad for the church and the community. I just don't want this church to be a symbol of the acts of one person, you know. I don't want our beautiful church that we all love to be a representation in any way of one person's horrible and I would call it evil acts.
The bishop came over the house. He said nothing like this had ever happened before, and they asked us not to press charges.
And what did your mother do?
My mother? She put out freaking cookies.
There was a lot of pressure to keep quiet.
From the church?
Yeah, from the church. But not just the church. From my friends. From the other parishioners.
Well, many of the priests that I treated were psychosexually stunted on the emotional level of a 12 or 13-year-old.
Jeez. Sure, the chief knew. Everybody knew, but nobody wants to cuff a priest.
And what about the prosecutor?
I shouldn't talk about this shit.
I think you should, actually.
Since the 1950s, there have been roughly 17,000 reported victims of church sex abuse in the U.S. alone, and these are just the ones that have been reported. An estimated 1.5 to 5% of the clergy is thought to have been involved in cases from countries all around the world. In the U.S., since 1950, almost 7,000 priests were accused of abuse. And it's reported that the Catholic Church has spent over $2.5 billion nationally on lawsuits. In Ireland, during the 2000s, the government launched official investigations into the charges. Subsequent reports estimated that possibly tens of thousands of Irish children were abused sexually and otherwise from the 1930s to the 1990s. In the Netherlands, a recent report alleged that over a span of 40 years, about 1 in 5 vulnerable children was molested by Catholic clergy. However, some point to politics as the reason for our seeming media obsession with the church. Cynics point out that several studies suggest Catholic priests are no more likely to sexually abuse children than other religious authorities. and some point to reports of similar cover-ups by the Boy Scouts of America for child sex abuse. But perhaps unlike these others, the Catholic Church has been infamously known for turning a blind eye. Some offending priests were simply relocated to another diocese where abuse could often continue.
Meet the Catholic Church, owners of a global child sex abuse scandal. In the past 50 years, around 30,000 people in 25 countries have reported abuse by Catholic priests. Church officials stand accused of failing to report cases to secular authorities. In a recent letter of apology to Irish Catholics, Pope Benedict XVI said fast-paced change and secularization has led to moral decline, blaming modern society. But the Church's own paper trail shows it has known about and failed to deal with the problem for 2,000 years. The first recorded link between priests and pedophilia can be found in a manual for church officials from around AD 60 called Kra'teaque. Older than the New Testament, it made the rule clear: thou shalt not seduce young boys. In 309, the Church's Council of Elvira, which dealt with issues of clerical marriage and celibacy, said those who sexually abuse boys may not commune, even when death approaches. In the 8th century, the Penitential of St. Bede, a renowned scholar and monk, argued that clerics sodomizing children should be punished. In 1051, St. Peter Damian wrote the Book of Gomorrah, which complained of rampant child abuse and attempts to hide it by church superiors. The book was addressed to Pope Leo IX, who reacted by punishing only the worst of serial sex abusers and arguing that abuse was a spiritual issue, not a criminal one. In 1140, a canon lawyer known as Gratian of Bologna called for pedophile priests to be put before secular courts. In 1568, Pope Pius V acknowledged the problem in the papal order, the Herendum, calling for pedophile priests to be charged. In 1741, Pope Benedict XIV wrote the definitive church document on child sex abuse, the Sacramentum Penitentiae. He recommended the problem be dealt with internally. Historians of the Church say that by the 17th century, a system of promoting and moving priests to avoid scandal had developed. In recent times, church laws passed in 1917 and 1962 called for cases to be handled in secret, with no requirement to report offenders. In 2001, head of the Holy Office and future Pope, Cardinal Ratzinger, argued abuse allegations should be dealt with under the Church's greatest level of secrecy, that of pontifical secret. This week, the Vatican pointed to guidelines created in 2003, but unfortunately not circulated, requiring offending priests to be reported to police. A small step forward, or further evidence of bureaucratic failure. The Catholic Church, owners of a so-called modern problem that goes back 2,000 years. Big on sin, big on guilt, not so big on confession.
Before we open this last and worst door, we must know that the parishioners are just as guilty in the situational and systemic factors that create in an otherwise healthy person the dispositions to create such evil. It is clear social psychology. And if we understand the neurology of this as well, these situations create a acquired sociopathy. Okay? In plain terms, it's not about bad apples. It's about bad barrels and bad barrel makers. And the priests and the hierarching organization, just as much as the parishioners, are all guilty in creating this situation and adding to this system that abuses in the worst way what Jesus Christ called the greatest among us in the kingdom of heaven.
Hi there. I'm looking for Ronald Paquin.
Yes?
Your father, Paquin?
Yes, that's right.
I'm Sasha Pfeiffer from the Boston Globe.
Okay.
Could I ask you a few questions?
Go ahead, yeah.
We spoke to several men who knew you when they were boys at St. John the Baptist in Haverhill. They told us you molested them. Is that true?
Sure, I fooled around, but I never felt gratified myself.
Right. But you admit to molesting boys at St. John the Baptist?
Yes, but as I said, I never got any pleasure from it. That's important to understand.
Right. But can you tell me where and how you fooled around with these boys?
I want to be clear. I never raped anyone. There's a difference. I should know.
How would you know?
I was raped.
I'm sorry. Who raped you?
Bonnie, who are you talking to?
Father
It's okay,
Father
Jane.
Peckman, who raped you?
Who are you?
Sasha Pfeiffer from the Globe.
Please
I was
get off
for
my
myself.
porch. Get inside the house, Ronnie.
Mr.
Get inside, Ronnie.
Sorry. I'm sorry. Who are you?
I'm his sister, and I don't want you coming back here.
Miss Paquin.
You better do better than you did before. Motherfucker knocking down the door. Love God with all your heart, mind, body, and soul. And equally, give love to others as you give it to yourself. The letter kills. Woe to you, the keepers of the law. For you did not gain access to the keys of knowledge. For you did not enter into yourselves. Not only that, but you hindered others from entering into themselves.
Get up here.
The disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" He called a little child to him and placed the child among them. And he said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." Once, on being asked by the Pharisees when the kingdom of God would come, Jesus replied, "The coming of the kingdom is not something that can be observed, nor will people say, 'Here it is,' or 'There it is,' because the kingdom of God is within you, in your midst. Since the beginning of creation, the invisible power and divine nature of the ever-present Godhead has clearly been seen and understood in the things that do appear. For those with eyes see."